Okay, right now what you're seeing there is Route 940. We're in Drifton outside of Freeland. And this is the old road. It's now abandoned. And I chose this this spot to do another segment called Cracking the Vehicle Code. At one time, we didn't have a vehicle code. It's going back 1903, 1902. The only laws that governed the roads was the penal code, such as the crime of recklessness. But the cars were flooding the roads, and that meant that the courts would have been flooded with court cases, because if you were charged with a crime, you were entitled to a trial by jury. So the courts used their influence. They wanted to have things done administratively. So the vehicle code was like an administrative crimes code, just sectioned off for the roads. But before that could be done, the roads themselves had to be reclassified. At one time we had what was called a public right-of-way. Well, around 1903 in Pennsylvania, they first declared the roads as a threat to public safety. Well, to justify that, they pre-adjudicated all vehicles as dangerous and all motorists as reckless by default. So that means that to be a motorist, it was a crime unless you were applied for a license, got registered. See, at one time when we had public servants, they recognized that the citizens had inherent rights. And in order to exercise an inherent right, you must be in possession of inherent liability. That you have the right to act. You don't need permission from another human, another man or woman. And that you are accountable for your actions. If you're going about the course of your business, if you would cause injury or property damage. So starting in 1903, the vehicle code became an administrative crimes code, like I said, set aside for the highways and the roads. But see, now we have a gray area. Well, before I talk about the gray area, since, like I said, starting in 1903, if you were pre-adjudicated as reckless by default, and they said that you needed a license, it was a clever ploy for you to waive your inherent liability. So if you filled out the application form without making objection, say, wait a minute here, you're going to have to take me to court, you're going to have to prove me that I'm reckless. So if you went and just filled out the form, by implied consent you were admitting that you were reckless. In fact, it was like an affidavit, you were snitching on yourself as a prerequisite of entering the default class of reckless motorists. So now that you're a confessed criminal because you violated the penal code, then you had to forfeit your inherent liability. And then the state gave it back to you in the form of assigned liability under statutory provisions. And part of that is that you waived your right to trial by jury. So now any infractions could be done using the fast track. But something happened in 1933. That's when a second phase of the federal government took over. Under the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1917, as modified in 1933, reaffirmed in 1972, and exists today. That's when every citizen became an enemy of the United States corporation. Under the rules of war, under emergency war powers, any existing contracts are vacated. They're canceled. They're no longer honored. After 1933, the state could not issue a license under the prior theory that to obtain a license you had to plead guilty to a criminal charge of recklessness. So from 1933 to the present, when you apply for a so-called driver's license, you are entering into a unilateral contract under international maritime law. Altogether different. So if you would fail to come to a complete stop at a stop sign, it's not a crime. It's not a misdemeanor or a felony. Now, if you would be involved in an accident and fleeing the scene, well, that's different. So if you did so, then the police officer could not cite a section from the vehicle code. They would have to go by a different section of an actual crimes code. What's been lost throughout history and the evolution of the vehicle code is that there was major transitions that took place. From 1903 to 1919, to apply for a license, you had to plead guilty to a criminal charge of recklessness as a prerequisite. Like I said, because it was so nice of you that you snitched on yourself, you received an immediate pardon. But then, as a confessed criminal, you had to forfeit your inherent liability. And then the state gave it back as a sign liability. Well, then in 1919, the federal government got involved. And that's when you were upgraded from being reckless to a combination between a thief and a smuggler, when they enacted the National Motor Vehicle Theft Act of 1919. But then in 1933, under the emergency war powers, all the prior contracts that the state of Pennsylvania had with its motorists were repealed. Because during an emergency or a declaration of war, all contracts are voided. They're repealed. I mean, going back to, say, 1936, the word driver wasn't even on the so-called driver's license. You were still classified as an operator. Like I said, these cadets, they go to the Humpty Dumpty Police Academy, like they're going to some cult seminary. The instructor hands them some garbage, and they just swallow it without even considering if this is true or not. I spent over 4 years spending a lot of hours at the State Law Library in Harrisburg, and I researched the evolution of the vehicle code going back to the beginning. So right now, today, there is no such thing as a public right-of-way. That a vehicle and a motorist, they are not allowed to trespass on this restricted roadway because the federal government declared all roads as hostile inland waterways and placed under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. So now you need a trespass license. And after 1933, that's done by the a unilateral contract under international maritime law. You might as well say this old road now we're looking at, this is an old canal or an old riverbed. But what I don't like is they use deceptive, generic terminology to conceal what's really going on. Last part of this video for this segment. So technically your vehicle is a vessel and you're operating on a hostile inland waterway under a unilateral contract under international maritime law. See, these cadets, when they go to the Humpty Dumpty Police Academy, they should take a field trip down to Harrisburg, to the State Law Library, and research matters for themselves. I mentioned deceptive generic terminology. They bastardized the word driver. In the current so-called vehicle code, they define a driver as one who drives or is in physical control of a vehicle. Well, because of clever word magic, they want to avoid using the word operator. So to me, a driver in its purest sense is one that's driving a commercial vehicle. It's like he's a paid driver for hire. If you were working at a parts store and you're delivering parts to a garage, you're engaged in commerce. But once you're traveling home in your so-called personal vehicle, you're not engaged in commerce, you're just traveling. Operators travel. Another thing too is federal government defined a motor vehicle as one engaged in commerce. So if you have your personal vehicle, you're just traveling. It's not a motor vehicle, it's just a vehicle. It's just a shame that these officers today who graduate from the Humpty Dumpty Police Academy have no clue as to what took place in the transitions. And one part of this next segment will be, like I said, concerning a traffic stop. Officer wants to... Now, if there was injury or property damage, that's a whole different ballgame. But if he claims that you didn't use your turn signal or you didn't come to a complete stop, you just breached the contract. And your contract was issued through the Department of Transportation. So if there's a hearing, you don't go to a magistrate. You go to Harrisburg and have a hearing concerning your contract. Because that's the subject matter jurisdiction. That's where the venue is. That piece of plastic you carry around in your wallet, that's just an indicator as a verified reference to your actual license. That's the repository is in Harrisburg. Well, we're coming to the end of the old Route 940, and I'll upload the next section.